is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Hello, good morning. This is Jacob Rees-Mogg for the LBC, the London Broadcasting Corporation, but actually I'm in Somerset. There is a fire going, the snowdrops are out, a few brave daffodils even are appearing in the garden, a slightly grey day, but as always, Somerset is the perfect place to be. Thank you for joining me. You can actually watch me live on Facebook if you're very technologically sophisticated, but if, like me, you're happier on a wind-up wireless, you can listen to me on that as well. What we're going to be discussing this morning, to start with, is Theresa May's speech yesterday in Munich. It was a very important speech on the issue of cooperation with the European Union once we've left on security and foreign policy. Mrs. May, of course, as a very long-serving Home Secretary, has a particular expertise in this area. She was involved in the security issues around the European arrest warrant and the opt-in and opt-out that happened a few years ago to decide which bits of European security policy we would cooperate and which bits we'd do independently. But her speech set out how she thought we would do it in future, and it had some very important lines. She challenged the EU to say that their political doctrine and ideology could have real damaging consequences for the security of all our people in the UK and the EU. She's telling them not to put ideology ahead of getting a deal that allows us to cooperate. And she also said that we must be respectful of the sovereignty of both the UK and the EU's legal orders. So, for example, when participating in EU agencies, the UK will respect the remit of the European Court of Justice. That has raised some questions, though I think it's reasonably clear, because she went on to say that as a third country, we will have our own sovereign legal order. It's very interesting the way this is developing. It's a clear Brexit that Mrs. May is setting out, but one with close cooperation. What she seems to want is that the structures that are in place now that have worked should be maintained, but they should be done on a basis of international cooperation in the way the United Kingdom operates with other third countries. So we have a very successful or very efficient extradition treaty with the United States. But the United States extraditions to the UK are determined by the US courts, and the UK extraditions to the US are determined by the UK courts. And Mrs. May seems to be looking for something similar in terms of how we approach our future relations with the European Union. She emphasises that we will be taking back control of our foreign policy, that with a seat on the United Nations, foreign policy will be set in the UK for the UK. Now, that obviously doesn't mean that we won't continue to cooperate with our allies. That will be something that we do, and indeed is something that we have done not just for decades, but for hundreds of years. All sensible countries cooperate with their allies. But the Prime Minister is making it clear that we will be independent of the official structures of the European Union in this respect, so that the occasion in 2003 when, for example, a British representative had to be present at a conference with Robert Mugabe against our normal policy will not recur. Mrs. May has really set this out, I think, very clearly, and it is her area of particular expertise, but it may be worth looking at what she said or hearing what she said, and this is what the Prime Minister, speaking in Munich about security after we leave the EU, did say, or a brief clip.
Changing the structures by which we work together should not mean we lose sight of our common aim, the protection of our people and the advance of our common interests across the world. So as we leave the EU and forge a new path for ourselves in the world, the UK is just as committed to Europe's security in the future as we have been in the past. Europe's security is our security. And that is why I've said, and I say again today, that the United Kingdom is unconditionally committed to maintaining it. The challenge for all of us today is finding the way to work together through a deep and special partnership between the UK and the EU, to retain the cooperation that we have built and go further in meeting the evolving threats we face together. This cannot be a time when any of us allow competition between partners, rigid institutional restrictions, or deep-seated ideology to inhibit our cooperation and jeopardise the security of our citizens.
That was Theresa May speaking yesterday in Munich, and this is Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'm standing in for Nigel Farage. Last time I did it for James O'Brien, so it's now once for the left and once for the right. Do get in touch. You can call on 0345 6060 973. You can text on 84850, or you can tweet at LBC. We're discussing Mrs. May's Munich speech yesterday, and we've just had a clip from her. I accept that I am not as sound a Eurosceptic as Nigel Farage is, and so some of you who are expecting to hear him may think you've got a lightweight on, somebody who's weak on leaving the European Union, but I'm not too weak on it, and I actually think this speech is very welcome. I think the Prime Minister has set out a very clear position that Eurosceptics can be happy with, and there are two things I would like to highlight. One is the issue of the European Court of Justice, because people have been in touch with me to say, are we remaining under the European Court of Justice when the Prime Minister said we would respect the remit of the European Court of Justice in EU agencies? And my answer to that is no. If you're dealing with a foreign agency, that foreign agency is obviously subject to the courts of that foreign power. So if British law enforcement has a relationship with the FBI, the American Federal Bureau of Investigation, is obviously subject to the US courts in how it operates. And that would be similar in our cooperation with EU institutions. That is the normal state of affairs. But the other important thing I think is worth highlighting is brought out very clearly by the distinguished political commentator Tim Shipman in the Sunday Times this morning, when he read into the speech that it was a clear declaration that we would pull out of the common foreign and security policy, giving the UK full control of diplomacy, peacemaking, defence and overseas aid for the first time in 26 years. That is a genuine taking back of control, and that's why I want to discuss it with you to see whether I am being a bit soft and Nigel would be tougher if he were on, or whether you think that what I've got to say is broadly right. If you voted leave or remain, please get in touch. Your calls will be very welcome, and we'd like to go first to Peter in Wimbledon. If you're there, Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, very good morning.
Is Peter there? Good morning.
What I would like to say is the issues, like all the other issues, unfortunately, before the referendum took place, neither yourself nor people on the Remain side actually explained enough in depth to the people of Britain what the consequences of leaving EU will be. And issues like customs union, single market, having Irish border reinstated, our financial sector losing EU trading passports, and issues of security, which are very important in this country. People voted blindly on a lot of things, hoping they're going to be able to have their cake and eat it. And unfortunately, if you want to have a deep relationship with the European Union, it's better staying within the European Union. And when you said about the European Court of Justice, it's important to work under one legal framework. Should we have disputes between European agencies and ourselves, then there should be one court who are going to make a final decision who's right, who's wrong. Our agency will operate under British law, European agency operate under European law, but what's going to happen when we're going to have disputes between two agencies or any kind of discrepancies? Because obviously we're going to have our legal framework, they're going to have their legal framework. And I just can't understand how it works. I think my point is that you guys, you kind of kept hidden quite a lot of facts about leaving European Union and led British public blindly towards this kind of Brexit mass disaster.
I wonder how much attention you paid to the referendum debate, because you say that nobody knew we were leaving the single market of the customs union. David Cameron told everybody that a vote to leave would be out of the single market and the customs union, and he accused Brexiteers of wanting us to be in a relationship with Europe akin to Albania. So that was very clear to people. And I think one of the key parts of Mrs. May's speech yesterday is her generosity to the EU. She's saying, we will never do anything that will reduce the security of our neighbours and of our friends. Don't you think that's an important starting point?
It's very important as a starting point, and the security is one we can be our security services where we can be proud of. And well, unfortunately, we can't have the same relationship we had while we were a member of the European Union, and that applies to all aspects of our life, not only security. As I said before, it's customs union, single market. And
but we don't want...
A lot of leading Brexiteers, like Daniel Hannan, were saying that no one questions our membership in a single market, and it turned out to be not true. And you guys never talked about customs union, about having Irish border.
Well, I did, actually. I talked about the customs union, and the Irish border is going to remain open. That's one of the key commitments of both sides. But the point is, we voted to leave, and that means a different relationship with the European Union. That was what the whole vote to leave was about. But thank you very much for calling. I'm looking forward to lots of other calls. You're listening to Jacob Rees-Mogg on LBC. I'm standing in for Nigel Farage. It is now 10:14 and 45 seconds, and we're just going to have a few messages. Hello, this is Jacob Rees-Mogg for LBC, leading Britain's conversation. I'm standing in for Nigel Farage, and I'm hoping lots of you will ring up on this Sunday morning on 0345 6060 973, or send a text on 84850, tweet at LBC, or you can even watch on Facebook. But I've got a new caller coming in. We're discussing Mrs May's speech in Munich yesterday, and I'm glad to say a fellow Somerset man is calling in. So Mike in Taunton, are you there?
Good morning, Jacob. Yes, I am.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for calling.
A two-part question, Jacob. Well, firstly, can I say thank you very much for everything that you're doing. It's very, very important what you and Nigel and the rest are doing. My question is a two-part question, very quickly. Do you see Mrs May's speech as delivering the Brexit? It's a big-picture question. Is the Brexit that the millions of us who voted for in the referendum, is that going to be delivered? We know what we voted for. We voted for an independent Britain. Is that, following Mrs May's speech, is that going to be delivered? And the second part to my question is, have you seen QAnon post 774? I think you would be very interested in it.
Well, the answer to the second question is no, I haven't seen that post. But the answer to the first question is, I think yesterday's speech indicated everything was going in the right direction. There's this important set of speeches from leading ministers. I thought Boris Johnson, as Foreign Secretary, set out a very positive view of Brexit, which we need to remind ourselves about, that it is positive, that there are real economic opportunities from leading and being free of EU regulation. And I absolutely agree with your point that people knew what they were voting for. The British electorate is highly sophisticated and understands these issues, and there's a slightly condescending metropolitan view that people like us, rural dwellers, didn't know what we were doing, and everyone I met in the rural areas did know what they were doing. And so I'm encouraged by yesterday. I think being clear that we will be out of the European Court of Justice in relation to our security arrangements is the right sign to be giving, and being out of the common foreign and security policy is, again, absolutely what we ought to be doing. It is taking back control, and in my view, taking back control is what people voted for. Do you agree?
I do, and I'm glad
Excellent.
to hear that you're optimistic, because you're closer to it than the rest of us. But please do look at QAnon post 774. If you don't know QAnon, I urge everyone to get familiar with QAnon.
Okay.
This is more important than... It's to do with Brexit, and this is a global movement. It's not just a Brexit movement. This is Donald Trump. This is much, much bigger than just Brexit.
All right. Well, I won't give it an endorsement because I haven't seen it, but thank you, and thank you for the wisdom of Somerset, which is very much appreciated. Now, we've been getting some texts in. There's one from George in Luton, where there's a famous airport, and it says, "Dear Jacob, Theresa May's speech. Personally, I found it worrying that she stated that the EU arrest warrant will still be enforceable in the UK. Surely that means that the European Court will still have supremacy over UK courts. Perhaps you could explain a little further." Well, thank you for that question. I think it is a key point to raise. My understanding is that when the UK issues an arrest warrant to be enforced in continental Europe, that will come under the auspices of the European Court of Justice when it's enforced in continental Europe. But that if a European country or EU member state country issues an arrest warrant that will be applied in the UK, when it is applied in the UK, that will be under UK court jurisdiction. It will be exactly the same as if we asked to arrest somebody in the United States. The operation of it in the States will be under US law, but in the UK under UK law. So I hope that's some reassurance, but it is a crucial point, because I agree with you, if it were the case that the arrest warrant in the UK was subject to the ECJ, that would mean they had a jurisdiction that I would think would be improper. Oh dear, there's one speech from Sam at Worthing. Now Worthing is in Sussex, which isn't Somerset, so you'll have to forgive Sussex for sending in the view that the speech was useless. The reality is nothing will change fundamentally, and you know it. Well, I don't agree. Brexit in name only will be delivered. In my parenthesis, that would be disastrous, close parenthesis. You will run out of Road of Lies in March 2019. Well, that's Sam of Worthing's view. I must confess I don't agree, but Sam, thank you for getting in touch and for the clarity of your thought. Everyone knows where you stand, and have a feeling you may be a member of UKIP, though you may think even they're not sound enough. But now I'd like to go to Steve in Rickmansworth. Steve, are you there, and can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, Jacob. Thank you for taking my call.
Good morning. No, it's a pleasure.
Morning,
Thank you for calling.
No, I've been watching you for a few years now, Jacob, and I really like you. I trust you. I think you're the most honest politician there is. Just want to say that. And I just want to thank you for all the work you've done.
Well, that's really kind of you. What a nice call to make. And thank you for calling on a Sunday morning. It's a good start to the week to have such a friendly call. And what do you think of Mrs. May's speech in Munich? Do you think she's hit the right tone?
I hope so. I like Theresa May. I don't think she's got our interest at heart. I think it's very difficult to change your mind, we've all been through these situations in life where we have to go down a path we don't want to go, and I think that's the path. She's going down a path that she doesn't believe in. I think there's only one Prime Minister that we need, and I'm speaking to him now on the phone. I know you're very shy about it, but we all love you, Jacob. Honestly, we do. You're a very popular man. There's nothing. The best thing about you, Jacob, is there's nothing on you, and that can't be said for most politicians. So I just want to tell you that we love you, and I pray that you become my Prime Minister, and I would love to help you as much as I can. That's all I need to say. That's all I want to say to you, Jacob, because I don't want to get into the other subject because I don't know enough about it. But we really love you, Jacob, and this is not just me. This is the whole of Great Britain.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. That's enormously flattering, and I'll just reassure people that we're not in fact related, and I didn't pay you to call in. But I'm very grateful for your endorsement, but I'm, as you know, very much supporting Mrs. May, and reinvigorated support after yesterday's, I think, excellent speech. Do please keep on sending in your calls on 0345 6060 973, or texts. We've got a quite lengthy text that's come in on the Conservative Party, claiming it's lost its identity, and it's getting almost biblical. A flock of sheep in the wilderness in need of a shepherd. Oh, then thinks I'm the shepherd. I'm not very agricultural, really. I do have a few sheep in Somerset. We keep 3 Jacob sheep to keep the grass down, which you can't hear baaing away in the field because they're just out of range. But that's a very kind... I can't see who this text is from, but it says the Liberal vocal will attack my belief, which indeed they will because it's a democracy, and that we're at a crossroads. Well, it's saying I should lead the country or Jeremy Corbyn will be Prime Minister. I think both are unlikely. Let's back Mrs. May, because I think she's the person who can give us the leadership we need. But thank you for that anonymous, if somewhat embarrassingly flattering text. Now, I'd like to go to Elizabeth in Pinner. Elizabeth, are you there?
Yes, hello. Yes,
hello, thank you for calling.
Well, I'm not a Tory, Jacob. Sorry, no disrespect.
That's all right.
I understand Mrs. May. I like the fact that Mrs. May comes from a working class background. It's what the Tory party needs. And every Prime Minister Europe has been their undoing. I voted to stay because especially when it comes to issues like security and information sharing, especially with all the recent incidents with terror attacks on the continent as well as in the UK. I think Theresa May has got the tone totally right. Even though I am not a Conservative supporter. I just think it is a big mistake to leave, because underneath we're all European. None of us are pure English. I just think that, you know, I always predicted, I'm even on YouTube saying Britain without borders. I always predicted that we'll never come out totally, that we'll always end up on the fringes and having to buy our way into possibly the single market, possibly the ECJ. But the European arrest warrant, like you say, should stay, and we should have very close ties for information sharing and security, especially with the recent terror attacks.
Well, don't you think that's what Mrs May was offering in a generous offer to the European Union, to say that though we won't be a member... Yes,
I do. I think it's so we should have that membership, but there are people, maybe in the Tory party, that ain't going to like that whatsoever.
Do you think so? Because, I mean, I'm reasonably Eurosceptic, and I'm happy with the speech. I think it's a good speech. You think it's a good speech. And can I thank you for calling? I'm really pleased that somebody who backed Remain has called in to give some balance to this debate. So I appreciate that, and somebody who isn't a Tory. But if it's united the two of us, do you think that's actually quite good for the country and will help bring us back together?
Them. Sorry, Jacob. No disrespect to you.
OK. Well, thank you very much for calling anyway. You're listening to Jacob Rees-Mogg on LBC, which stands for Leading Britain's Conversation, not, as I said before, the London Broadcasting Company, because we're in Somerset. And I'm standing in for Nigel Farage, and it is just coming up to 10:30, and that means what you've all been waiting for. It's time for the news with Amelia Cox. Hello, this is Jacob Rees-Mogg for LBC, Leading Britain's Conversation from Somerset, and I'm standing in for Nigel Farage, one former leader of UKIP. But this programme specialises in former leaders of UKIP, and I'm very glad to say that Henry Bolton will be joining us after 11 o'clock to have a discussion on what's happening to that party. In the meantime, we're discussing Mrs May's speech in Munich yesterday, what she said about security policy, the arrest warrant, how we cooperate with our friends in Europe when we're not any longer a member of the European Union. Calls are coming through thick and fast, but you can add your name to the list if you call 0345 60 60973, and you can watch on Facebook. And I can look directly at a little camera that I believe is beaming this to people glued to their computer screens watching it live on Facebook. You can text on 84850 or tweet at LBC. So it's Mrs May's speech in Munich. Is it what we wanted to hear? Is it something Leavers and Remainers can unite over and support as it sets out a generous policy of cooperation, but one that we take back control, no longer subject to the ECJ and no longer part of the common foreign security policy with the requirements that come with it? I'd now like to go, if I may, to Charles in Birmingham. Charles, are you there from the United Kingdom's second city?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I do watch Mrs May's speeches, and yesterday I was not impressed because, to me, she had put something on the table that shouldn't even be on the table. It should be given, and that is security. That shouldn't even be in negotiations. It shouldn't be discussed. It should automatically be there, no matter what, for any country. Now she's put this on the table, the EU will use this as a bargaining chip to get more what they want. Every time she does a speech and put something on the table, the EU uses it against us. We should have no more speeches. She should go to internal negotiations with what she wants privately because when she walks in, they know what she wants and they use it as a bargaining chip. But security, no matter what, shouldn't it be on the table? Shouldn't it be discussed? It should be a standard for any country, especially the world we live in right now.
Can I quote a bit of Mrs May's speech to you? Because I think you agree with her and she agrees with you. She said, Europe's security is our security, and that is why I have said, and I say again today, that the United Kingdom is unconditionally committed to maintaining it. And don't you think that was the right and generous tone for her to take?
Yes, but the EU, you and I know the EU, especially the two we're dealing with, will say, OK, you want it unconditionally, but we want on conditions. You know what they're like, and that's what they will do. Whatever we put, they always put conditions on it, and that is the problem with saying anything in the open before you go and speak to them. You must keep it close to your chest and then speak to them later.
But don't you think that as we contribute more to their security than vice versa? I mean, it's another point Mrs May makes in her speech, that the UK arrests 8 people on a European arrest warrant for every one that we issue to other member states, so that we're the pretty much biggest individual contributor to European security, so they need us rather more than we need them.
Yes, but the 27 might see it that way, each individual leader, but these two don't see it that way. Barnier and Juncker see it as a bargaining chip, and that is a problem with them. If you were dealing with each individual country leader, yes, you could say, yes, we'll agree this, but you're dealing with two very stubborn men that want everything their own way and to give us nothing, and that is a problem I have.
Well, Charles, I think you cut through to the heart of the matter. I think that's a really important point, and that the 27 individual leaders are more reasonable than the EU ideologues, and I think that's why it's important Mrs May set out that we should get an agreement regardless of this hardline ideology in favour of a European Union superstate, which Mr Juncker denied, but he must be forgetting the 5 Presidents report that set out a European superstate a couple of years ago. Thank you for calling. Before I go to the next caller, we've had some people saying they can hear some crackling in the background. Now, this is not a problem with the line or the satellite signal coming from Somerset. It's the fire. During the adverts, we put a couple of logs on the fire, and the new logs are sparkling and crackling away. So I hope it doesn't disturb you too much. And we'll now go to Lorraine in Chelmsford, if she's there, to hear what she's got to say about Mrs May's Munich speech. Hello, Lorraine.
Hello, Jacob. How lovely to speak to you. I am a leaver. I will tell you that now.
Good, thank you.
My big concern is I believe that we're getting involved in EU integration with regards to our military and also the procurement. I believe Germany wants to do the manufacturing of all weaponry, etc. I don't know if you've seen Veterans for Britain's website, but
I know of it, yes.
Yeah, I think you should look at that because I think we're having the wool pulled over our eyes. I don't think the intention is of our civil servants, Mrs May, that we will be independent military, and I'm really cross about that because as far as I'm concerned, who controls the military controls the country.
I mean, I agree with you that the control of the military is absolutely essential. I get the impression from what Mrs May has been saying that she views NATO as being more important than the European Union in this regard, and that once we've left, we won't be subject to any EU command structures. So we'll cooperate, and even in procurement, there are some cost advantages in cooperating with other countries, and we do it a great deal with the United States. So I wonder if that's some reassurance for you that outside the EU will be in a much better position to avoid the single European army.
Well, since November 2016, Britain has taken place in 5 meetings in the EU regards to our military and our finance and our manufacturing. You know, I think that she's planning and our civil servants are planning on actually integrating our military to a certain extent, and I'm not happy about that. I think we should be independent completely and align with NATO with that.
Well, I absolutely agree with you.
Nation. We're also a very proud nation. You know, our military service has always been something of pride for a lot of Britons.
Lorraine, I agree with you that NATO is the key to our defence, and thank you very much for calling. I think what you've said will ring a chord with many people. But I'd now like to go to Chris in Teesside. Chris, what did you think of Mrs May's Munich speech? Did you think it hit the spot, or do you have some concerns?
I think in terms of the speech, I think the speech was very... it was what you'd expect from such a summit. And I think generally on the issue of security, the one thing I wanted to pick up on, and it's something that you alluded to earlier, about the Irish border. Now, there's many, many issues there. But I still don't quite understand on the issue of security and also probably the biggest issue of Brexit, immigration. Nobody wants a hard border. And you said there's been guarantees made on the Irish border. But I just don't understand on a security front, an immigration front, how you can not have a hard border and retain basically the premise of what people want in terms of Britain coming out of the EU. Because, the DUP don't want Northern Ireland to have the same deal as the rest of the UK. They don't want a hard border in the Irish Sea. And there's so many things about that dynamic that I just do not understand, and I don't think there's clarity on it. And I think it falls under the security issue as well.
Can I try and give you some reassurance? On the issue of immigration, the Republic of Ireland isn't a member of Schengen, and therefore there are controls on people going into the Republic of Ireland, and that immigration controls in relation to work or renting a house or opening a bank account take place with the employer, the landlord, and with the bank. So that if you want to come into the country and work illegally after we've left from Europe or anywhere else in the world, you might just as well come in through Heathrow on a tourist visa and overstay, but there will be no greater risk of having an open border between the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, and that in terms of trade, we'll be an independent country, and it will be up to us to say that we don't actually want to put any tariffs on Irish goods. We don't want to put any non-tariff barriers on Irish goods, and therefore we will be free to maintain the border. So both from a security immigration point of view and from a customs point of view, there's a very straightforward solution. And then you're pushing it back to the EU and the Republic of Ireland to say, we don't want a border, do you? And the Republic of Ireland certainly doesn't, and therefore you're just left with the EU ideologues, and you have to say to them, this is not in anybody's interests. So I think the Irish border problem is very soluble. One quick text, somebody asking me to clarify the better bill. I assume it means the Brexit bill. Mrs May says it's 30 to 40 billion, but this figure is arrived after deducting 53 billion that the EU owes us. What is the bill and how is it arrived at? It's arrived at through making contributions to the end of the current financial period at the end of 2020, and then committed but unspent EU money. So it's basically where it comes from. I happen to think it's too high. But now it's time to go over to the messages, and you're listening to Jacob Rees-Mogg on LBC, standing in for Nigel Farage. It is 10:45. I'm 11 seconds behind schedule. Well, welcome back. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, standing in for Nigel Farage, and we're discussing Mrs May's Munich speech yesterday, and we've had lots of people getting in touch, and people can watch live on Facebook if they want to, and we've had a text from a black taxi driver, and as a rule I will always hear the views of taxi drivers, as Disraeli called them the gondoliers of London, so thank you for getting in touch. And he says that he's relieved Mrs May didn't use her speech to get support for Uber, which he thinks is disgraceful and is decimating the taxi service by its corruption. So thank you for that view from one of London's fine taxi drivers. What a British sight they are. I always feel proud to be British when I see a taxi, and very often relieved with that yellow light gleaming in the distance when it's raining, and you hope that nobody will get it before you. But I want to go, in fact, to Daniel in Stoke Newington to hear what he's got to say about Mrs May's speech. Daniel, are you there?
Hello, Jacob. How are you? Can you hear me?
Well, thank you. And you?
Yeah, not too bad.
Loud and clear, yes.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So I'm a Remainer. I have to lead off with that one, really.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs May's speech on several levels was very nice. She wants to keep in place several different security elements with the European Union, which I think is important. Although what I've noticed is that rather conflicts with what you said a few weeks back, using the term vassal state about Britain. And I wonder how you and other members of the Conservative Party can hold both of these ideas in your brains at once. It seems like 1984 doublespeak to me, and I was wondering if you might be able to fill me in on what you mean by a vassal state.
The vassal state was a reference to the proposal that we would have to accept all new EU laws and be subject to the European Court of Justice. That would be a worse position than we're in currently, because we would have no say in these laws. And it would also be worse because the EU would be able to pass laws that we can currently veto. So there are still areas of European regulation creation that are subject to unanimity. In the period once we've left, in the transition period, we obviously won't have a vote, and it would be perverse if we had to accept laws that we could currently veto and have therefore stopped in an interim period between the date of departure and the conclusion of the final agreement. That's what I meant by vassal state, and being under the European Court of Justice would mean that our superior court was a foreign court in which we had no representation. I think that's a position we ought to avoid and is not going to be created by what Mrs. May said yesterday. But you think otherwise. Why do you think what she said yesterday will leave us as a vassal state?
Well, no, I don't think it'll leave us as a vassal state. In that, I didn't want to. I didn't
then
want
we agree.
In the first place. Well, no, this is the
first
thing.
Place. Yes,
but forgive me. I just have to get this one in, just because I'm in a lucky position to
do please. Yes,
on public television, radio. But when you've just said live on public radio that the UK had a veto in Europe. Now, that's very, very interesting, because I read so many times in the run-up to the referendum and since that the UK has lost its veto. Now, to hear
well, it has lost its veto in many areas.
Has it? Because
we've got to deal with it.
This is the problem, and again, we've got this doublespeak. On the one hand, you've just said, but we'll lose our veto, but then on the other hand, you say we have already lost our veto. Now, I find this one very difficult.
Both of those.
Which one is it?
Well, both of those statements are true. That we have a veto on tax policy, we have a veto on the multi-annual financial framework, we have a veto on the common foreign and security policy. We do not have a veto on the common agricultural policy, the common fisheries policy, single market regulations. That veto has been given up successively over the treaties post the Treaty of Rome, but some vetoes still remain. So this is a perfectly consistent point, and the key to understanding the European Union and our relationship with it is in the detail, and that's where the answer to your question comes. But we're going to go from Daniel to Dan. Dan, you're in Crawley, and I'd very much like to know your views on the speech of the Prime Minister in Munich. Dan, are you there?
Yes, Jacob, I am. Good morning. Pleasure to speak to you.
Good morning. Well, thank you for calling in.
That's quite all right. Yes, I thought Mrs. May's speech was admirable, actually, and I think the position of our government is admirable in this, because I feel that Britain, since the referendum result came clear, we've been treated with quite a bit of spite and bitterness and contempt by EU leaders, particularly the likes of Juncker and Barnier. And I feel that on the issue of security, it could be very easy for Britain, because I feel that we contribute more than we take. It could have been very easy for our government to withhold a lot of security and use it as a bargaining chip and say, you're not going to get this unless we get X, Y, and Z. But, you know, the issue of security affects the average citizen, and it's French people and German people and Dutch people that would probably suffer more from that. Because, you know, in these times we live in with terrorism and organised crime, it's real citizens that would probably end up losing their lives potentially if we took that stance. So I think it's an admirable position, because I think that certain other people, if they were in charge, might use the position of power that Britain finds itself in this issue to treat the EU with a bit of vitriol in return.
Well, I completely agree with you, and I think it's really important that the Prime Minister was generous in what she set out yesterday. I think in a negotiation it is right to be generous about the things that you know are in everybody's interests, and not be mean-minded about it, and not to use it in a way that would undermine the UK's reputation as a country in favour of law and order and stability. So, Dan, thank you very much for your point. And I'm now going to go to Gary in Frome. Frome is one of the loveliest towns in Somerset, a really elegant place, so I'm very glad to have a caller from Frome. Gary.
Hi, Jacob. Well, first of all, I just want to say that I'm a massive fan of yours, along with many other people in this country. There's a growing community of people around here who really believe that you and just a few others are the only people that are standing up and defending this country now. And I mean that. We really do feel that the government is not doing what we voted for. And this country took a massive gamble, a hell of a gamble in leaving the EU, and that is why we want to go. We need to go. Now, everybody I speak to, either on social media or in the street, up and down the country, they just don't believe now that we are going to get what we voted for. Now, Theresa May's speech the other day was fantastic. It was great. And I'm fair play to her for doing that. But nobody believes that she is going to deliver what we have asked for. It's all smoke and mirrors. It really is. And it's now time that we stop and we get somebody in who has this country in its heart, who wants to give us back what we stand for and we need. And you are the only person who can do that, we believe. I know it's a huge thing to have on your shoulders, I understand that, but nobody believes in Theresa May and in this country's being given what we need, because every time we turn on TV, we see Question Time, which is bias, we see the BBC News, which is just lies. Nothing is being done fairly.
Well, thank you for your personal vote of confidence, but I'd have more optimism about where the government is going. I actually thought yesterday's speech was really important because it was so clear that out, in fact, means out. It's back to Brexit means Brexit. It has a great clarity about it that we will be taking back control. There isn't any fudge in yesterday's speech. And perhaps in the other bits of the negotiations, there will inevitably be some give and take, some bits that we will accept that we don't want to accept, in the aim to get a friendly relationship with the European Union at the end of it. So I give your vote of confidence to Mrs May. I think she is heading on the right lines, and that she understands the power of democracy. Did you see the response she gave to some former German ambassador who said it would be better if you didn't leave? And she said the British people have voted to leave. I thought that was Thatcher-esque in its clarity. Do you agree with that, or you're not reassured? Oh, he's gone. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It was very nice talking to him. We've had a text asking to explain to a business student what impact a no-deal end result would actually have, which is a very important question. I think we could survive a no-deal because we'd be in charge of our laws and that we would be able to keep sensible things going with the European Union. But we're coming up later looking at UKIP with its request for its 7th leader in 18 months. Henry Bolton was sacked yesterday after party members backed a vote of no confidence. What do you think? Do you think this spells the end of UKIP as a political party? Will Nigel Farage have to come back? Will a new party have to be formed? Should all UKIP members join the Tory party? If you think there's no way back for UKIP, then call 0345 6060 973. If you think they've recovered from a lot worse, then text 84850. Or maybe you think UKIP Mark II will emerge. If so, tweet at LBC. You can watch me on Facebook live from Somerset with a crackling fire in the background.